Welcome back to the Munn Avenue Muse podcast and video cast brought to you by munnavenuepress.com. We publish, market, sell books, design beautiful covers and interiors, and help edit and proofread so that you have a professional book to share with the world. And I'm so delighted today to welcome one of our authors who recently published a book under the Munn Avenue Press imprint called A Kid Grows in Brooklyn. His name is Art Shulman. And let me tell you a little bit about Art. Art is a proud native Brooklynite, has written a bunch of books, all very different from this one, including the previously published I'm Wrong, I'm Sorry, I Love You. I bought that book, wonderful book. Tyrus Carson's Ride and Barnaby Brain. He's also known for his over 100 plays, including comedies, dramas, and dramedies. Art graduated with a PhD in psychology and was a professor for 20 years at California State University, Northridge. He has 2 daughters, 3 stepchildren, and 3 grandsons, and lives in LA, California with his wife, Rebecca. But a big part of his heart still resides in magical Brooklyn. So welcome, Art. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thanks for coming on and sharing a little of your story with us.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you, answering your questions, talking about myself. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
What could be better, right? So tell us a little bit about growing up in Brooklyn and what inspired you to write A Kid Grows in Brooklyn.
What inspired me was my wife, Rebecca, who's really very, very attractive. And I over time, I tell her about my experiences growing up in Brooklyn. And several times in the past, she said, Art, you need to preserve those memories. You need to write them down so people will be able to know about them later on. So, okay, so you know the expression happy wife, happy life. So I figured I'd start writing them. So I happened to be at my brother's house in San Francisco last year and had nothing better to do. So I started outlining what some memories might be. I didn't write them. I just wrote a few words about what they were like. And, you know, I started out with maybe 20, and then I added to them and added to them. And I ended up with about 90 different memories of growing up in Brooklyn, and that became enough for a book. So that's what inspired me to do it. Is my wife insisted in her way that I do it, so I paid attention to her.
Well, and that's what was more than enough for a book because it's 328 pages. It's gotten a wonderful reception. It's selling very well, and people are posting pictures of themselves with your book on social media.
Yeah.
It's quite wonderful. I think there's a lot of nostalgia around Brooklyn and people who grew up in Brooklyn. And for those who don't have a direct connection to Brooklyn, Brooklyn has a kind of cachet internationally as a cool and interesting place, wouldn't you say?
Yes, it definitely does. But I got a reaction about the book from people all over the country in different cities, and of course, the people who grew up in Brooklyn at my time, or even a little, you know, after that, and identify with it. I've gotten so many replies or messages or reviews that people say, I could have written that book. I'm the writer. What's so that they have the same experiences. Plus, and so does people. The book isn't just for people who grew up in Brooklyn who are interested in Brooklyn. Of course, they are, those people are, but also people who grew up in other places. It reminds them of their childhood, the things that happened to me and what it was like also happened to other people, and it brings back their memories.
Yeah, I grew up in an urban area of New Jersey about the same time period that you did in the 50s and 60s. And there are a lot of similarities. But I think what makes your book particularly engaging is that first, you have a great sense of humor. So most of the stories are pretty funny. Um, some of them are very poignant, but there is no doubt that these were real experiences. They're authentic and they come from the heart. And even some of them are not such great experiences or reflect some bad behavior on your part, but they're real. And I think people can relate to that.
Well, there's one chapter in the book called "I Am Ashamed," and in that chapter, I wrote 10 times when I did bad stuff that I was ashamed of. So,
I remember that chapter.
so I figured if I put all 10 of them into one chapter, it wouldn't be 10 separate chapters. It wouldn't seem like I was constantly was ashamed of what I did. So I put it all into one. There's some other times when I was ashamed too. So,
But we all experience that, but not many people are willing to share it. And I think that it makes the story very human. Is there one of those stories that you would read for us?
sure. So I have to put my glasses on though. Okay.
All right, we'll edit all this nonsense out,
Okay.
except maybe putting on your glasses. It's because people will wonder how your glasses got on your face so fast.
Okay. How about this one? Well, I'm just going to show you this is the book. Actually, it's
Right,
behind me too, but
right.
what am I doing? I'm showing the back.
And
There.
we will talk about the cover. Okay, let's hear the
Okay.
story.
So it's called I Sang Opera. I Sang Opera. So I'm reading this now. My neighborhood pals and I were not cultured aficionados of opera, symphonies, museums, ballet, and other such highfalutin nonsense. Probably none of us even knew the word aficionados. And even if one of us might have, we would have pronounced it like affectionados. Our culture mostly centered around sports. We followed sports teams, particularly the Brooklyn Dodgers, and read the sports section in magazines. We played stickball, touch football, and punchball in the street. On the sidewalk, there were games played with the ball, curves, box ball, king, and stoop ball. Some of those sidewalk games were played right next to my 4520 apartment building. One day, we young teenagers realized that someone new had moved into the first floor apartment close to where we played some of our games. It had to be someone new moving in, since no previous tenant loudly belted out foreign language opera. Where does she think she was? Opera was phony in comparison to the real rock and roll. Didn't have a beat. It had weird tunes in foreign languages. So, naturally, one day as the lady began singing, we, including me, stood outside her window and stridently warbled, mimicking and mocking her. Example, since she was singing what seemed to be Italian, I loudly sang the word spaghetti in a high-pitched falsetto, significantly elongating the T sound at the end. We repeated our fun time behavior several times over the next few days. Soon she stopped singing her opera or anything for that matter, at least when we were outside her window. I never knew if she sang when she knew we weren't around, or if she moved away, or maybe stopped singing altogether, but it ceased when we played games near her window. Back then, we were proud of doing our part to remove phoniness from the neighborhood. But now that I'm one of them highly cultured aficionados myself, being a writer and all, I'm mortified. Life lesson? What or who you look down on at one point in your life may become what you or who you are like later in life. Be generous in your opinions of others and willing to admit you may be wrong. The end.
Great. That's
So,
great. And that, I read that chapter and like three-quarters of, and by the way, I've late in life come to be an opera lover, and I'm on the board of a local opera company.
oh,
So I was, I was ticked off at you for being such a jerk. Eh, but you, we all do stupid stuff as kids, particularly teenagers, but your life lesson says a lot about um, reflecting on your life and what's important. And to me, the greatest value in life, and this relates to your book, but elsewhere, in everything, is kindness. Being generous. You use the word generous in your life lesson. Being generous, being kind. Um, we all have a limited time here. Why not be kind? So it's a great story, and I like the ending particularly. Um,
oh,
so let's talk about the cover of the book. Why don't you explain those images on the cover?
okay.
Um,
All right. A couple of things. One is the apartment building here is the apartment building that I grew up in. What happened was Rebecca, my wife, happened to be taking a trip to Brooklyn. I didn't have a picture of this before. She happened to be taking a trip, actually to New York City, but she made a trip to Brooklyn with some friends to my old neighborhood, so she knew what it was like. And she took this picture of the building. It's a six-story building. It's typical other people from Brooklyn reading this saying, this looked like my apartment house. So that's the building where I grew up. What's interesting is that the day she took the picture was raining and it was actually overcast. And see the corners here, it's blue. So I said, okay, we can use the apartment building, but it's not going to be overcast. It makes, depressing. So we photoshopped the blue sky. Okay, the picture is actually a picture of me. There I am. I think I was 5. I mean, it looks like I was 5, so it's an actual picture of me when I was 5. The actual picture photograph actually has my brother in it, but we cropped him out, just have me. Uh, so that's the story of the cover. I think it's it really appeals. The cover really appeals to people. So
and
um,
our designer at Mun Avenue Press put those pieces together, made the sky blue, and hold it up again, Art, because I really like the font that she
that's
chose for that. It's kind of a nostalgic font, and it has the feel of that time.
and
Um,
and very readable.
right, and very readable. And that's actually from for those who are authors out there. One of the things I learned um, kind of by accident with my first book, Not So Dead, was that um, all the local bookstores around me carry my book. And store in particular, the owner really loved my book and stocked it, and he put a copy of my book in the window of the bookstore. And the font was very large because that's the way Jess, our designer, made it. And I noticed that I could see and read the title of my book through the window from across the street. Whereas the other 8 books in the window, I couldn't read at all. And this translates to the appearance of your book on Amazon because Amazon, in effect, is the store window. And frequently your book will appear in a small thumbnail size. And if you look at an Amazon page and scroll down where there's a bunch of book covers advertised, usually half of them will be unreadable. And some of them they color the font to make it stylized. And I think you can have a great looking cover like that, but one that has a very pronounced readable title, which will help sell your book.
Yeah.
And I think a number of things have really come together so beautifully for art. For this book, for you, art is, obviously your writing, your memories, your sense of humor, a great looking cover. It's very aesthetically delightful to read.
Okay. Let me mention one other thing about the font that you mentioned. It's playful. The font is playful. It's not, you realize that it's you that there's humor in it. It's playful. So
Right.
I really love the title the way the font was selected. Hey, I have to mention something about Munn Avenue Press is that whatever initially talking with Charlie about publishing this, um, everything that he said they would do, they did. They're still doing it, but everything that he said, they did at high quality. The book is, the cover looks great. It was proofread. It was the description in the back was better. It's a better description of the book than I could have written myself. So I'm very happy with it. Oh, my wife is really happy with the paper that was used. I don't know exactly what. I think it doesn't. Some papers have a poor odor or something like that. But she said this really smells good physically. So I'm very happy with working with Charlie, and he's available when I wanted to talk to him and so on. So good company.
Well,
Okay.
thanks for the kind words, Art. And it's interesting that you mentioned the paper because um, I guess I do maybe half my reading in paperbacks and the other half on ebooks. And the only reason I read ebooks is I can read in the dark at night and not wake my wife up. But there's something about the tactile feel of a good paperback or hardcover book that's part of the experience. It's a sensory experience. So Rebecca is adding in smell to the senses, but there's
Right.
clearly the visual, there's the feel, and maybe even the sound of the pages turning. That's quite enjoyable when you're working, you're reading a book. Um, so I know you have an upcoming stage performance. Can you talk a little bit about what you do? You do the one-man shows, is that right?
Yes, it's a solo show. I did one last year. And there's something I'm in Los Angeles, by the way. There's something in Los Angeles called the Hollywood Fringe Festival, where in June, a whole bunch of shows go up at local theaters. And some of them are solo, some of them are big productions, musical productions. And my show is, I did it last year. Last year's show was called Being 80, Too Old to Change. Okay. And it went very well. Sold out the shows, and people really liked it, got good reviews, you know. And then I said, "Wow, I think I like doing this. I'm gonna do one next year." And I didn't want to do the same show, so I thought this year I would perform a different show than Being 80 Too Old to Change. And I called this one Am I Really Jewish? And it's partly based on information in the book A Kid Grows in Brooklyn. I like doing it. I perform. I didn't think I was an actor, but I'm pretty good, you know?
Well, you are expressive, and hopefully you'll bring a bunch of author copies along so you can sign them for people that might want them.
Yes, I
You
do
should.
tell. I'm going to, at one point in the routine. Of course, I did pick up the book and to say, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and also in the trunk of my car after this performance.
Yeah, well, good for you. And I hope you'll somehow do a video of that performance, whether Rebecca takes it or somebody, you
No,
hire somebody to do it.
Yeah, I've already hired somebody. Somebody did the show, recorded the show last year, and same guy is going to record the show this year.
No, I want to see it, Art.
Okay.
And Lily, who you know works with me but lives in LA, has mentioned that she wants to come to the show. So you have
Yes.
to.
Yes,
Uh,
she said, I heard from her yesterday, and she says she's coming to the opening show.
oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, great.
yeah.
And she does wonderful work too. She creates the back cover copy and the Amazon description, and I do mention during these podcasts little tips about um, presenting your books to people that are listening who might be authors. And one of the big things that people miss is you may expend a lot of effort, whether it's on social media or running promotions, to bring people to your book page. And what are they going to look at? So first they're going to look at the cover, and if they like the cover, great. Then they're going to look at the title, and another time we can talk about all our discussions around the title, um, which landed up being great. And then they're going to look at the reviews, and on your book, you've gotten many good reviews. I think it's 4.4 stars on Amazon. And then they're going to read the description of the book. And almost every book that I see on Amazon, including ones by the big traditional publishers, just put a synopsis of the book there. Whereas really what should be there is sales copy. So you'll see in the description we wrote for A Kid Grows in Brooklyn that it starts with a kind of hook. And yes, it describes the book. And then it ends with a call to action. In this case, grab your copy of A Kid Grows in Brooklyn and embark on an unforgettable journey through Brooklyn that will leave you laughing, reflecting, and cherishing every page. The idea is to convert more of those visitors to the page into buyers. The other thing we put on the page is what's called A+ content, which you see on many books is big graphics that maybe feature reviews of the book, things like that. So there are things you can do to up your sales and conversion rate by presenting your book well on Amazon.
Yeah.
And if we haven't mentioned it, although we sort of did sideways, is that A Kid Grows in Brooklyn is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Your local bookstore can order the book. And if you come to one of Art's shows, he'll take a copy out of his trunk and sign it for you. So if you're anywhere in the area.
I
What's new? What are you working on next? Are we going to see another book from you?
I don't know. I mean, who knows? A year ago, this time a year ago, I had no idea I was going to write a book.
Well, you mentioned a
Something
possible sequel.
come up. I'm
Be,
sorry, what?
you mentioned a possible sequel. I mean, um, we were trying to finish the book, and I remember getting emails from you that, oh, I have this other story. Oh,
Yeah.
I have another story. Can I get this story in? And it was like, at some point, we had to say, time out, Art. You know, we've got to publish this book. So I know you have a lot more stories in you, and I encourage you to consider a volume two of A Kid
Okay.
Grows in Brooklyn.
Okay. I do want to say that you didn't cut me off. Okay. You gave me the chance. You said, if you want to add, it'll take more time to get the book out, but it's up to you. So you left me with the choice. But I don't know if I have 90 memories. This book, by the way, goes through up to age 18. Okay, up to age eight.
And well, and now you're 25, so you've got to have many more stories to tell.
Well,
Maybe the next volume is LA stories. I'm sure you've got a few of those. You've been there quite a while, right?
hey, I want to mention something about my review. The reviews have been basically almost all four, mostly fives, majority of five stars. Uh, more a whole bunch of fours. So I want to mention one person gave me a two review rating. I want to talk about that because I think it shows how people were involved with the book, even though he gave me a two, because he wrote a comment. Okay, the reason why it was only a two was I have a chapter there on egg creams, making egg creams. Those from New York know what an egg cream is. It's a delicious drink made with three ingredients, you know, milk, seltzer, and syrup, usually chocolate syrup. So the reason why he rated just a two was that I did not mention that it was made with Fox's U-Bet syrup. I
Well,
mean, so involved with the egg cream, that destroyed credibility because I didn't mention Fox's You Bet syrup. So
that's funny. The subject of reviews and what people write is a funny kind of subject because um, I've spoken to authors, and if any author ever says to you, "Oh, I don't read my reviews," they're lying. Every author reads their reviews,
right,
um, and even famous authors like Hemingway, when he got a bad review, I think he even punched out a journalist who wrote a bad review of one of his books. They read reviews, and like you, I mean, I've written six books, and my thriller series, the Not So Dead series, which is the first four. Um, they're all, 4.5 in that area and mostly fives. But I got a one-star review once because Amazon shipped them the wrong book.
oh,
And it's like, what? I had nothing to do with that. That doesn't seem fair. So we're looking for that validation. And also first-time authors who have never put a book out. This is your fourth or fifth book, but we do work with a number of authors and they're publishing their first book. And it's scary because you don't know what people are going to think. And I know how I felt when I wrote Not So Dead is that I didn't know if people were going to like it or hate it. And the first time I got a 5-star review from somebody who wasn't a friend or a relative, I said, okay, that's it. Now I'm a writer. It counts.
right.
But you don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. And I know in this political climate, we're working on some books that are political, and they're going to there are going to be people that hate it because it doesn't align with their politics, on
Right.
one side or the other. I'm nonpartisan here. But I read some really negative reviews of a Michael Connolly book, and I love his books. I read many of them because he made a political statement in there against a candidate that many people love. And they bombed him. They went after him. So it's really too bad that we can't have better discourse. I think there's more of a need for that.
Right.
And Amazon used to let the authors respond to reviews. So, like your egg cream guy, you could have said, "Hey, what are you doing? Give me a 2-star review because I didn't mention this." You could even tell them, "Well, in the second edition, I'm going to add that to the book." um, and then also, reviews can also be instructive. If somebody picks out something they don't like, and it's a valid comment, you can learn from reviews as well. So,
Yeah.
we're learning all the time. We're not perfect, but if we study our craft and we're open to constructive criticism, we can get better.
Well, I
Um,
do that. I do that a lot. I write, as you mentioned, I write plays, and before any play is actually performed, it goes through multiple readings ahead of time where you get audience response and people tell you what works and what doesn't work. And then you listen to the comments, and sometimes you say, wow, that really makes sense. And other times is, what? You don't know what you're talking about. So you just decide what you're going to use, but it's very useful to get comments. When I was writing this book, I wasn't sure it would be commercial. It's my memories. Who cares about singing opera or something? And so I gave it to a friend of mine when I don't know, I had maybe 40, 50 memories at that time. And I showed it to her and I said, is this, she did some editing. And then I said, is this commercial? And she says, what? Are you kidding? I love this. People will love. And so she told me it was commercial. I wasn't sure in the beginning. Once,
right. You don't know. And it's a team effort. I mean, when I finish like the second draft of my books, I have a group of beta readers, I call them, and I send copies of the book and they give me feedback. And the best ones are ones who will really pick on you. But I get a lot of, you said his name was Jerry in chapter 2, and then you called him Stan in chapter
right.
52. So you need that kind of feedback too. And the A cream comment's interesting because in my books are thrillers. So I have many places where I describe a gun in the book, and the gun people are watching. You really got to get it right because if you don't get it right, they'll let you know. And I'll tell you a funny story, and I love getting feedback from readers. A funny story about a mistake I made in one of the books. It's funny what happens with reader reactions. I was talking about guns, but I got a letter from a reader because in my first book, Not So Dead, I mentioned 3 Mile Island and the nuclear cloud that was emitted by it in 1979. And my wife was pregnant with my first son at the time, and we were in New Jersey, and the cloud was moving east from Pennsylvania over New Jersey. I didn't want her to be exposed, so I put her on a plane to Boston to stay with a friend at the time. And so the woman wrote me and said, because I mentioned in the book, 3 Mile Island is near Pittsburgh. And she said, it's not near Pittsburgh, it's in middle of Pennsylvania, which, was a fact that I had gotten wrong. So I wrote her back and I told her the story about my wife and the cloud. And she said, well, since you wrote me back, she responded again, let me tell you my 3 Mile Island story. And her story was when 3 Mile Island happened, and it was all over the news. she was in a coma in a hospital for 2 weeks. And you know how they say, well, when you're in a coma, you can hear what everybody's saying. And of course, most of us have never been in a coma. And I said, yeah, I've heard that. She said, well, I was in a coma and my husband sitting in the hospital room was watching CNN all the time. And when I woke up 2 weeks later from the coma, I knew all about 3 Mile Island and asked him about it. So I thought that was a great story, but it's also an example of the fun that an author can have engaging with your readers. I get a lot of emails from readers, and I answer every single one of them um, because to me, readers are important, and books are nothing without readers, right, Art? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's an audience.
Very narcissistic.
Yeah, it's an audience. Just like when you perform your one act shows and you fill the theater, the performer and the writer in this case appreciates the audience support and involvement and enjoyment. And in many cases, books can change your life, which is something we'll talk about in future podcasts.
One of the readers of the book was an old fraternity brother. This is way back. Fraternity was when I was in college, and he told me a story. He had he lived in the same when he was in law school, the same building as Joe Biden. Okay. Later on, he became involved in real estate in New York City. And who was his client? Donald Trump. So he dealt with both of them.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting stuff. Well, Art, it's been such a delight having you share your stories and your wonderful new book with us today. I will mention again that it's available on Amazon.com. It's called The Kid Grows in Brooklyn. And the subtitle is Memories of a Magical Time. And you can get it at barnesandnoble.com or order it from your local bookstore. And if you have a book in you or are interested in publishing and would like to know more about it, check us out at MUNN avenuepress.com. This is brought to you through the Munn Avenue Muse, MUSE, and it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Substack. So please subscribe, like, comment. I would really love to hear from you. Thanks for being here, Art.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me.